Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CXI Masterclass. My name is Vlad Demsa. I'm the co-director of CXI Research Group at Swinburne University, and I'm going to be your host for this session today. So this session is the fifth installment of our ongoing series of free and publicly accessible masterclasses, which we run every quarter. And in this masterclass, we're going to be focusing on the role of AI in shaping the transition from linear to circular consumption. We've got lots of attendees joining us today, including industry professionals, academic staff, and that includes both Swinburne and other universities, both domestic and abroad. In terms of the format of this session, I'm first going to give a brief introduction and overview of the research. Our first speaker, Rakesh Bandipelli, who is the co-founder of Your Product Passport, is going to provide some insights into how organizations are currently taking a circular approach through innovative practices like modular product design, take-back schemes, and subscription services in a way that blends profitability and sustainability. Our second speaker, Professor Sean Sands from Swinburne, is going to present the research findings from 20 in-depth consumer interviews focusing on how AI can help overcome barriers to circular consumption through personalizing engagement, improving accessibility, and normalizing sustainability choices. And finally, Associate Professor Carla Ferraro from Swinburne is going to outline best practices for deploying AI in circular initiatives, and that is kind of to help guide consumers towards product repairs, offer creative upcycling ideas, and help with sustainable disposal, while also overcoming things like trust issues, technical complexity, and inclusivity. And once the presentations are finished, we're going to have around 10 to 15 minutes or so for questions and discussion. So throughout the session, if you kind of think of any questions or if you'd like to contribute any of your own thoughts or experiences, please feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll then relay them to our presenters so that they can share their thoughts. Before we kick off, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land on which Swinburne's Australian campuses are located in Melbourne's east and outer east, and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So let's dive into the research, which was all about understanding the role of AI in circular consumption. And this research was funded by a seed grant provided by Swinburne's Social Innovation Research Institute, or SIRI. And overall, the Institute supports people and technology in addressing complex social challenges. We also have an industry partner for this project, which is Your Product Passport. And Your Product Passport is a blockchain-based platform that encourages circular consumption. And it does this by storing information about things like product warranties and allowing users to engage with after-sales service, repairs, ownership transfer, and comprehensive product information. And in terms of the research team, we had quite a multidisciplinary team. Our chief investigator for the project was Associate Professor Carla Ferraro. From marketing, we had Professor Sean Sands and myself. From management, Professor Hardy Gaderi. From Health Sciences, Dr. Ilona McNeil and Dr. James Williams. And from the Centre for Urban Transitions, we have Dr. Olamide Shitu. And Erica Ang is our research assistant for this project. So very much a multidisciplinary team and approach, and a close collaboration between SIRI, our industry partner, Your Product Passport, and the research team here at Swinburne. So we're talking about circular consumption. It's always good to start with a definition. And we define circular consumption as a regenerative system aimed at minimizing waste and maximizing resource efficiency. And unlike the traditional take, make, and dispose kind of model of consumption, circular consumption is all about emphasizing practices like recycling, reusing, repairing, and upcycling to essentially extend the life cycle of products. And why do we need circular consumption? Well, it creates this kind of regenerative system that reduces the reliance on finite resources, which by definition will inevitably run out. And there's a real sense of urgency here. So globally, we're witnessing a significant decline in the use of secondary materials from around 9.1% in 2018 to just 7.2% in 2023. And even worse, countries like Australia seem to really lag behind the rest of the world with a circularity rate of around 4.4%. And this really highlights that there's a pressing need for systemic change in this area. Now, importantly, consumers play a pivotal role in this transition from linear to circular consumption. And empowering and informing consumers is really critical to embedding circular habits in their everyday lives. So if we can drive consumer demand for eco-friendly products in this way, we can also then encourage businesses to adopt circular approaches. And technology also plays a really key role here. It makes engaging in circular practices easier, more efficient, and accessible for consumers, and also for businesses as well. In the last couple of decades, we've seen a number of foundational platforms emerge which have facilitated recycling, reuse, repair, and upcycling. So, a great example of this, which some of us use every day, are marketplaces like eBay and Facebook Marketplace, as well as communities or digital kind of places that repurpose, swap, trade, or exchange different products. But now we're seeing this new set of emerging technologies that could drive the next wave of circularity. And these technologies are artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, and a couple of others. And they can make circular choices more accessible and embedded in everyday routines. So to kind of summarize the research problem here for you, we know that the overall success of a circular economy hinges on active consumer participation. And consumer choices directly influence how products are produced, used, and discarded. And so informing, empowering, and shifting consumer attitudes is crucial to embedding some of these habits. We also believe that emerging technologies hold tremendous potential to drive the next wave of circularity. So tools like AI can transform sustainable choices from complex challenges into really simple everyday habits. And so to address this, our research focuses on two key questions. Firstly, what are the barriers and facilitators to circular consumption? And then secondly, how can a AI implementation, such as a dedicated AI assistant, support consumers in these circular consumption practices? And finally, I just want to walk you through our research approach and give you a bit of a helicopter view of how we conducted this research. And we did so in 3 phases. So in phase 1, we conducted qualitative interviews with 20 Australian consumers to really uncover the barriers and facilitators and the role of AI in circular consumption practices. Moving down to phase 2, we built on these findings through an industry roundtable, and we brought together circular economy experts from industry, from the consumer side, from the academic side, and from government as well, to share their thoughts and foster cross-sector collaboration. And in phase 3, which is currently underway, we'll be conducting a quantitative survey, and this will use experimental scenarios to test the effectiveness of AI-driven interventions in promoting circular consumption. We also wanted to have a framework or a theoretical lens to use, and for this we selected social practice theory. And social practice theory enables us to understand circular consumption in the context of everyday habits and social contexts. So instead of focusing on individualistic consumer choices, it looks at circular consumption as part of a larger set of social practices involving resources, competencies, and meanings. And when we talk about resources, we're talking about things like materials, tools, and infrastructure that enable or prevent circular consumption. Competencies are really referring to knowledge and skills developed by consumers in engaging in circular consumption. And cultural meanings refer to the shared beliefs, values, and expectations, or the social attitudes towards circular consumption. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of the research and some context and background to the research. I'm now going to hand over to Rakesh from Your Product Passport to talk to you about how organizations are currently taking a circular approach.
Thank you, Vlad, and thank you everyone who has joined this session. Quite an exciting, interesting topic as we move forward into the economy around circular space. And firstly, I'd like to thank you, the team at Swinburne, for this opportunity all the way from different phases along the journey. And then obviously we got to this webinar presenting the overview. So based on following to Vlad's discussion, I just want to give a graphical overview of circular economy and give a snapshot of the linear economy versus recycling and circular economy. And by the way, before I forget, my background, in addition to being a co-founder of Europe Product Passport, is more than a decade of experience in supply chain. So I'm quite heavily into the linear economy, where I work with multiple companies where the take, make, use, and waste is a general practice, unfortunately, in a current scenario. And there are elements of supply chain that sort of works in the recycling economy, which is the middle section of this visual graphic, as you can see. Obviously, the recycling is better than linear, but ultimately circular economy is we want to be heading into. And as you can see, it's completely eliminating the waste and the pollution, but also circulating the products and materials to the highest value as long as we can use it. And then it's all about the regeneration as well of the nature. So in summary, as you can see it here, most of the companies we are currently operating, and even Vlad mentioned it before in the research part of it, is just under 4% or just over 4% of companies are in circular space. So there's a lot of opportunity here, but also there's a lot of milestones and barriers to get through from linear to recycling to circular economy, which is our ultimate goal, which I'll give a little bit more insight on my next slide now, is around what do we actually need to do it. So this is a survey by a company called ABB. They're a very, ABB is a technology leader in electrification and automation, enabling a more sustainable and resource efficient future. So this business is more than 150 years old, and they got 110,000 employees globally. And it's a report that is available open source online to everyone. So they've done a survey with end of 23 around circularity, no time to waste. And as part of this survey, they engaged with 3,300 senior industrial decision makers globally, obviously heavily machine manufacturing supply chain within 12 countries. And all these companies are employing more than 200 people. So they're significantly big size companies globally and everything. So the most important part of this research is, as you can see here, almost 3,300 responses came back, is 91% are currently impacted by resource scarcity, which again is a big thing within supply chain. If you understand supply chain, or if you're part of manufacturing, you need raw materials, you need the resources to produce more products or produce more products into the economy. So the challenge is a lot of companies, and I'm being personally in supply chain, I see and hear these problems a lot. The quality of materials is degrading. The manufacturers are not ultimately able to find more materials because we are on a finite planet with an infinite mindset, but unfortunately that doesn't work. So we already taken a lot of extraction already, and now we are heading into the scarcity of the resources. That again, it's all linked into the climate change and the global warming and everything. We won't go into that space too much, but again, I wanted to give you why we are in this space and why do we need to move to circular economy. This is one of the key survey to drive that. And then 67% of the survey are all investing in circularity in the next 3 years. They're already in circularity, or they've got some sort of initiatives and investment, but they're going to be increasing it further in the next 3 years. So there is a big push globally as well, who sort of understands what is it to mean for the company. And obviously the definition is another aspect of the survey. And then the 67% are using sustainable products already in the process, which is again, great thing. Better than being a linear, it's better to be a recycling. And then if you can make it circular, even better. Just so from a number perspective, like recycling is actually the number 9th thing on the circular economy. If you've got 10 steps in circular economy, recycling is number 9. Even before you get to number 9, there's another 8 steps to do: reuse, refuse, all that stuff, even before you get to recycling. So, and 84% agree circularity drives innovation and competitiveness, and that's another big thing for businesses. Is you wanna drive profit, but also planet health, and that's the biggest hurdle for companies to digest. It's a new way of doing business, but also it's important, coming myself as well from a commercial background, to understand we need profits and the planet to sustain our people long term. It's a very important part of it. And I'll dive in. The next slide will give us a snapshot around circular economy forecast. And again, this is in euros, because obviously Europe is a little bit ahead of us with in terms of circular economy space. And this visual here shows you different industries and how they're tackling circular economy and what is the forecast over the next 3-5 years, 2030, if you're looking at here. So obviously it's a huge market, and you can see the fast moving consumer goods has a big impact, big portion from a recycling and sustainability, but also you got entertainment, you got consumer electronic appliances. And as you can see, the different color codes, which is basically recycling, refurbishing, and renting and reselling products. So it's a combination of multiple things to achieve circularity. There's no single answer to circularity. It's a journey. It's almost like digital transformation. There is multiple things in this ecosystem to make it work. So that's why you see different elements into this journey, into the transition from linear to circular. And the next slide will give you a really good insight into some companies already who are in this space. So there's some definitely known brands to most of them. And there are some brands who are starting the journey into circularity. I'll probably give an example of Fairphone. Actually, I've got one in my hand right now because of the background. It's not easy, but it's a company that's heavily emphasizing on recyclable phones. And one of the biggest challenge with mobile phones is the inbuilt battery. That is the biggest hazard for the climate and from a circularity as well. So Fairphone has actually taken a few steps back, and then they now starting to make phones with open battery. So you can actually dispose the battery, buy a new battery, so you have a longer period for your phone rather than having an enclosed phone with a battery where you actually can't do anything. So, and then there's quite a few brands here. I'll probably highlight 3 brands, not going through everything, but I'll quickly go through the next slide where it will give you insight into Patagonia, which is a very famous brand. Again, they're very radical in terms of their approach, but also they're quite a communist active company who have made a big impact on the planet over 25 years now. But also there's a big announcement, which is probably end of 22 or early 23. They made Earth the only stakeholder of the business. So that's a big move. And also driving other businesses and inspiring other business to lead the change. This is one of an example of Patagonia's repair centers, where you can actually take your clothes. They will repair it for free, provided it's under the initial 1 or 2 year frame. If it's not, then you can actually get it repaired for a nominal fee, or you can actually swap your new old clothes for new clothes as well. So again, this is very new way of doing business, but there is Patagonia believes there's more profits in retaining existing resources rather than depleting more new resources from the planet. So, and again, it's understanding the business principles. And the next slide will give us a little bit of insight into HP. Again, they started the journey in 2017. And as you can see, circularity is not just about planet, but also it actually is driving business results because it's acting with purpose. It attracts a lot more new talent and increased trust with customers. And this is an interesting one too, because the challenge of retaining employees is definitely a difficult one, but HP has observed 91% of employees agreed that HP is a leader to commitment to sustainability. Therefore, they're able to retain their staff because they're attracting a lot of talent, because the company actually has more future thinking circular model incorporated into their business model. So, which is what most of the new generation and the new workforce are all looking for, to work with purpose and make sure that they actually make an impact. So, and the next slide, not the last slide, the next slide is actually another company talking. This company is called Next Wave Plastics, and they collect plastics from the ocean, and they become a supplier to companies you're looking at here. HP as an example, IKEA, Wave Payment Cards, a bag company who make from Solagard bags, and furniture company as well. So, and again, here we are talking plastic that is floating in the ocean is collected as a raw material, and it's been processed, and they build into new products. So a perfect example of ultimately you don't want plastic in the ocean. You don't want to go to that stage, but at least there are companies now initiating this process. and turning off their traditional supplier base where they get raw materials. They're moving into different ways of getting raw materials, such as next wave plastic. So it's a big change, and there's a lot happening around the globe in terms of the circularity and how everyone's tackling it from a product perspective. And one of the key ones around circularity and moving, especially from a product perspective, is the importance of digital product passports, which again dives into my next slide, which will give a really good insight into what does it mean, because it's obviously a very new concept, maybe not so new, maybe a couple of years old in Europe already, but European Union is putting into a legislation which is already in place, but they're mandating every company who are selling a product needs to have a digital product passport by end of 2035 or somewhere around 2040. It's almost a mandate now. So what it enables is it's almost like a regular passport where you travel, you have entire history of all your travel, including the dates and everything. So digital passport is pretty similar to that, but also it actually has a lot more information about the products we own as a consumer. So you got third-party digital providers, you got brands who are selling products, and you got marketplaces like Vlad was mentioning before, Facebook and Gumtree and eBay. And my startup, Your Product Passport, comes into the third-party passport provider space where I'm enabling the brands or the second-hand marketplaces with digital passport, giving a lot more insightful information into the product's journey and its whole history, which is a few bullet points in the next slide. I will mention about that. So a digital passport in summary is a digital identity card for all the products and the components. At a very high level, the most important information is about the product technical performance, the materials and the origins. How can you repair your products? What are the recycling capabilities, and what are the impacts of its life throughout its life cycle on the environment? So it's not limited to just these 5, but again, as Your Product Passport, we initially offered these as the 5 key features. It will expand into a lot more other modules as the company dives more into the circularity as well. And from a solution perspective, on the next slide, I mentioned more around the collaboration and the digital data sharing that will enable the product journey all the way from manufacturer, all the way to the end user, to the second user, to the third user, and then eventually gets to its end of life cycle. And circularity is all around cradle to cradle journey. So it will finish its life as an initial product, but it will give birth to another product in a different format. So that's where the material usability will come in place. So you're re-shelving or reusing the product, refurbishing the product into another product. That's where the circularity cradle to cradle journey comes in place. But how do you do that? You need a collaboration platform. You need the data that needs to be shared across the life cycle. Through that process, we can address the resource scarcity, where we can enable the procurement of different suppliers through recycled materials. And then you have informed decision-making throughout the journey, and the traceability and transparency will provide further insights into the valuable materials that have been used, but also provides a lot more trust to your consumers as well, being a chain of responsibility, but also consumers can build more trust, which eventually will foster more circular company models, which will develop customer use markets to reduce emission footprint and enhance resource scarcity. So that sort of gives you an overview of how the platform is empowering its solution, and also provides the manufacturers or the brands who are keen to transition to circular economy. It's an important aspect of the product feature to enable the transparency and traceability throughout its life cycle of the product. And one more slide before we pass it over to Sean, which is the last slide here. So, and again, I like a lot of pictures, hence I thought I'll put a picture here so you can see product right in the middle. You can see the performance cycle, you can see the material cycle on the left, and then you can see the maintenance, the use, the service contract, and the product goes to disassembly, recovered materials, production again, and installation, and then back to a product. So it's an infinite loop of circular economy, hopefully. And there is a famous circular economist, Walter Stahel, in Europe. I read his book, which is called Circular Economy Principles. A final statement is around the goods of today are the resources of tomorrow at the resource price of yesterday. So it's a very powerful statement. Read it again. You'll have all this available online as well later. So that sort of finishes my sort of presentation. Thanks, Vlad, for this. And over to you, Sean.
Right. Thanks, Rakesh, for taking us through the context. My job today is really to set the scene around the consumer research and the interviews that we conducted earlier this year. So we conducted 20 interviews with consumers across Australia. So on my first slide, on the next slide, I'm going to really set the scene around consumer understanding of circular consumption. And it's kind of what we found was quite interesting, and it kind of leads to the point or reinforces the point Rakesh just made around the fact that there are multiple steps in circularity, but consumers typically see recycling as the key component of circularity. So there's this narrow view of what circularity means. And this limited perspective really overlooks the broader range of activities we just went through, like repairing and upcycling, even secondhand shopping. We also found that there was confusion around what can and cannot be recycled, which adds to consumer challenges and creates more of a barrier. Other barriers also, cost and convenience, were discussed quite commonly, and these issues, cost and convenience, really deter people from engaging in circular practices. They often perceive circularity or engaging in circularity as actions that are either more expensive or more time consuming than traditional linear consumption. The quote that we've got on this page here at the bottom right hand corner was pretty common among our consumers. People saying something to the effect of, it's often easier just to go to Coles and grab something wrapped in plastic because I need it quickly. And I think that really highlights the everyday decisions, or how everyday decisions are influenced by convenience over sustainability. On the next slide, I'll talk a bit about the typical forms of engagement that we heard from our consumers. So despite the barriers, consumers do engage in some forms of circular consumption in a variety of different ways. We did hear limited examples of people talking about recycling and secondhand purchases, composting, repairs or upcycling. But those kind of were the kind of extent of activities that consumers were talking about. Of those, recycling is definitely the most common activity that was discussed. But its effectiveness really depends on a couple of things, like access to proper infrastructure and knowledge. People were often telling us that, for instance, their council didn't provide adequate bins to do different forms of recycling. Secondhand purchasing was also popular, especially, it was touched on previously as well, platforms like Facebook Marketplace being the kind of go-to place where consumers think of for secondhand purchasing, beyond the kind of extensive network of secondhand stores that exist. Composting and repairs were also seen as an impactful avenue of behavior, but they were less widespread, and typically less widespread due to what we would classify as knowledge gaps and resource constraints as well. So composting was often quite difficult, particularly for respondents that lived in like multi-story apartment buildings, for instance, even though there are products that can help you do that. Really, I think the diversity in these activities demonstrates that while consumers have an initial willingness to engage, their participation is often shaped by the availability of resources and infrastructure that's made available, in particular by councils. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about the key barriers to circular consumption, and there were 4 of these that were predominant in our conversations. First is the lack of infrastructure, which I touched on the previous slide. This really kind of highlighted and came through as consumers telling us that they lacked adequate facilities, particularly for recycling and composting. Second was around economic challenges, consumers not seeing sustainable options as an inexpensive path. So sustainable options were perceived as more expensive. A lack of knowledge and confusion was very common. Consumers were telling us that they were unsure of what to recycle or how to engage in circular behaviors. And I think this comes back to what we were talking about in the prior part of the presentation around even just with devices that have different components. What do I do with the battery versus the case versus, other bits and pieces that the product breaks down to. Finally, there perceptions of complexity and effort. So the process of adopting circular practices consumers were telling us that it feels overwhelming compared to simply just purchasing new products or kind of finding the path to least resistance. So people were really looking for not only education, but prompts to kind of help them to know what to do, when to do, how to do it. So these barriers really highlight the need for, I think, better infrastructure, better education, and better support to really make circular consumption not only more accessible, but more appealing across the broad spectrum of consumers. The next I'm going to talk about on the next slide, key facilitators to circular consumption. So on the flip side here, there were things that our consumers were telling us that are facilitators that do encourage them to circular activity and circular behavior. The first being social influence, which plays a powerful role. Our consumers were telling us that they were often inspired by friends, families, or social networks to engage in certain behaviors or certain practices that align with circularity. The ability to access support services, whether it be accessible recycling centres, for instance, could also make it much easier for consumers to adopt sustainable practice. And also information access. And people were telling us about some of the information that they were getting through digital platforms, for instance, like TikTok and Pinterest, being places where people get inspiration and ideas and knowledge and kind of are empowered to see others doing and to really learn in kind of a tutorial and guidance way. Finally, there are also just behavioral prompts, people telling us that things like reminders and even rewards being a motivation to engage in certain forms of circularity. And that really creates a sense of achievement and making sustainable actions habitual as well. So there may be ways to, to think about gamification in terms of incentivizing circular behavior. On the next slide, I'm just going to talk about the role of technology. So we spoke to our consumers about how they perceive technology in their behavior and how it might be able to be utilized. So it was clear that technology plays a really important role in supporting circular consumption. I touched on some of the platforms, the kind of social platforms that people were using. But it's definitely not without its challenges and limitations. So I'd say on the one hand, technology can facilitate circular behavior by connecting people, and yeah, as I said, building inspiration, education, and so on. Not only for ideas and inspiration, but also with just a broad base of people that are open to and interested in secondhand goods, for instance, or learning information from others. But I think what's really important is that the ability of technology to act as a mechanism is definitely not uniform. Not everyone is comfortable with technology. Some of our participants, especially our older respondents we spoke to, struggle to navigate apps or online resources. And also others kind of spoke about technology overload, finding that there's really just this abundance of information, whether it be on platforms or online, that they just found confusing or even frustrating. I think this highlights the importance of design in technology and designing front ends that are really user-friendly and accessible across a wide range of populations in the community, and that those tools can become more broadly accessible to the population. If we just focus for the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about, dive a bit deeper here into the AI-driven opportunities for circular consumption. So we wanted to kind of funnel down from technology broadly to kind of think about how AI in particular might play a role. And I think it's fair to say that AI, speaking to our respondents, is seen as offering significant opportunities, particularly opportunities to overcome barriers and to really step into that space of prompting and educating. For example, people spoke to us about how they've had experience or could imagine having experience with, for instance, an AI chatbot, and how that could enhance access to circular resources, either connecting users to information about repairing services in local communities, recycling facilities, and so on. But essentially, they could also help build competencies through a step-by-step process of almost like a tutorial, making the unfamiliar approachable, kind of overcoming the barriers of practices that people were kind of seeing in the past. I think also we heard a little bit about how AI can even shift cultural norms to embed sustainability prompts into daily habits, making circular consumption more visible and socially valued. But AI was definitely not without its challenges. And on the next slide, I'm just going to focus on those challenges. And it's really important to say, if I said that technology was not uniformly accepted, then AI was definitely a lot more bumpy. And again, particularly if we look at differences across our age cohorts as well. So whilst technology or AI could be seen as leveraging opportunities, it also came with its own set of challenges. Really, a lack of trust was discussed, a lack of understanding how it works, the black box of AI, what information is retained, what do they know about me, or that kind of thing. Are kind of major barriers for our consumers. This was particularly common among our older generations who were kind of expressed an unfamiliarity with AI in general. There was also from people's prior experience with, say, for instance, chatbots, there's kind of a view that miscommunication, complexity, errors are also relatively common within AI platforms, and that these problems can really frustrate users. So if a chatbot fails to provide clear information or guidance, this kind of sets this kind of negative tone from the outset. A lot of people spoke about really the experiences and interactions with AI-driven telephone voice prompt service systems, the kind of, you can never get through to speak to a human, and that frustration. So not wanting to have that same kind of experience in interacting with an AI for circular consumption. So I think ultimately accessibility remains a concern for AI, particularly as AI platforms really, if they were to come to the fore, need to cater to a really diverse digital literacy base, and include features like voice commands for inclusivity as well. So I think important things to consider in designing these platforms. So if we just jump to the next slide, what I want to just kind of wrap up on here is how can we enhance AI for circular consumption? Speaking to our consumers and reflecting on what they told us, we think that there are opportunities to address the challenges, but a number of improvements and considerations are really essential. So first, we need to really think about how we improve AI for accuracy and accessibility. That may be things like better natural language processing, voice command integration, but we also need to think very clearly about trust and familiarity. Clarity in communications, clarity in data privacy, and really demystifying AI for those hesitant users or people that don't see it as a black box. And finally, really this understanding and promoting personalization to ensure that any AI tools really do align with an individual's preferences, local context, making circular actions more relevant and engaging. And I saw a great example of how this is coming to life in the real world. Pedigree, the pet brand, has done some great things with using AI in some recent ad campaigns. So they kind of identified this underlying problem about pet adoption. Obviously, pet adoption is a major issue. This is in the US, their study and the campaign. And they want to find ways to, basically to increase adoption rates. So they used AI and would let a whole range of, hounds basically send through pictures of dogs, very basic pictures, on a white background. They would then use AI to kind of make the picture, model quality, for instance. And then those pictures were placed in real time in ads all around the US. But what was really interesting about this campaign is that they used AI to contextualize the placement of ads. So for instance, if they were placing ads in New York City, in areas that have relatively low level of outdoor space and a high density of housing, then they wouldn't put large dogs in the ads. They'll be putting kind of relevant dogs to the context in those ads. And they saw a huge increase in adoption rates and also a huge decrease in the return rates. Apparently one of the main issues in the US is after a dog goes out to adoption, a huge percentage of them are returned within 2 months. So I think as an example of how AI can kind of overcome some of these challenges, that's a great example of using context and AI to kind of increase or engage in some more pro-social behaviors. So just to round out my section before I pass over to Carla, circular consumption has immense potential to drive sustainability, but consumers do face barriers. Technology can, in some ways, address these challenges, and we think there is opportunity for AI to operate in the space and to make circular practices more accessible, more impactful, and more culturally normalized. And I'll pass on to Carla.
Thanks, Rakesh and Sean. Following those key consumer research insights, what I'm going to share with you are really insights that we gleaned from an industry roundtable event that we held as part of this research project. And part of that industry event involved discussing circular consumption best practices from around the globe and some more specific opportunities for AI-powered chatbots in particular to play a role in empowering consumers with personalised, actionable and sustainable solutions. So I'm going to talk about the opportunity for AI to drive circular consumption across 5 key areas: product care and lifespan extension, creative reuse and repurposing, sustainable purchasing and disposal, rental and sharing platforms, and finally, education and community engagement. And along the way, I'm going to cover some specific applications and share some real-world examples of brands that are actually doing great jobs in encouraging circular consumption, but also so we can showcase how AI can be leveraged to drive meaningful change in consumer behaviour. So let's dive in and see how AI can help make circular consumption not only possible, but importantly also practical and engaging for everybody. So first, let's take a look at the opportunity area of extending the lifespan of products. And this can be broken down into 3 specific applications. First, there's repair and maintenance. AI chatbots can guide consumers through repair processes by providing step-by-step instructions. They can use image recognition, and they can even diagnose specific issues in products like electronics or furniture, making repairs more accessible for everybody. A second application is product life extension alerts. Here, AI tools can proactively remind consumers about routine maintenance, such as when to clean or replace filters or service appliances. And these timely alerts can really help prevent things like breakdowns and ensure the products last much longer. And finally is subscription and take-back management. Chatbots can manage product subscriptions or leased items by notifying consumers when it's time to return or replace them. And this feature encourages a circular relationship with products, reducing waste and ultimately promoting reuse. So taking a look at 2 examples where AI can amplify some existing efforts to extend product care and lifespan. First, let's have a look at IKEA's Circular Hub and Take Back program, which many of you have probably heard of. This program allows consumers to return, resell, or refurbish their IKEA furniture. And this obviously helps to extend the life of their products and reduce waste. So the role of AI here can actually be very critical. It can provide personalised repair guidance to customers. It can send reminders for maintenance to prevent early wear and tear, and even recommend refurbishing or reselling options tailored to each individual item. A second example is Koala Living's modular design for longevity. Koala's innovative approach ensures that instead of discarding an entire piece of furniture, consumers can simply replace individual parts. So, like the IKEA example, AI can enhance this system by doing things like sending personalised alerts when a replacement is needed, offering step-by-step repair instructions for specific components, and providing sustainable disposal or recycling options for older parts. Moving on to the second area of opportunity, let's take a look at how AI chatbots can inspire and support creative reuse and repurposing. A key application here is upcycling and DIY projects. AI can provide customized suggestions for upcycling, tailored to the materials or the items that consumers already own. For instance, if someone has leftover fabric or old furniture, a chatbot could suggest creative ways to repurpose them into something useful or decorative. And this not only fosters creativity, but also reduces waste. Another application is virtual wardrobe and clothing swap management, which some of the examples that both Sean and Rakesh already spoke to. So AI-powered digital wardrobe tools can help consumers maximize the value of their existing clothing by planning new outfit combinations. Beyond this, AI can also facilitate participation in clothing swaps by recommending items to exchange and even connecting consumers with swap opportunities. And of course, this encourages reuse, reducing the demand for new clothing and minimizing the environmental impact. So 2 real-world examples where AI can significantly enhance creative reuse and repurposing efforts are firstly, Selfridges Worn Again initiative. This initiative incorporates swap shops and resale opportunities to encourage consumers to reuse and creatively repurpose their items. The role of AI here could be to analyse consumer-owned items and provide tailored upcycling ideas. AI can also recommend suitable swap options and guide consumers on how to repurpose or creatively reuse their possessions. And of course, this makes circular practices more personalised and engaging. Next is Lush's Green Hub. By recycling returned containers and promoting reuse, Lush is helping consumers rethink their waste and embrace sustainability. The role of AI in this initiative could extend well beyond recycling. It could educate users on upcycling techniques for other household items, provide personalised suggestions for repurposing materials, and even offer step-by-step guidance on adopting similar practices within their homes. Moving on now to the third area of opportunity. This one relates to how AI chatbots can support both sustainable purchasing decisions and proper disposal practices. A key application here is sustainable shopping assistance. AI chatbots can provide real-time recommendations for second-hand or sustainably produced items during the shopping process itself. For instance, if someone is shopping for new furniture, a chatbot might suggest a high-quality second-hand alternative or highlight brands that are committed to sustainability to inform those purchase decisions. A second application is material identification for recycling. So using things like advanced image recognition, AI can help consumers determine the correct recycling method for various materials. By simply scanning an item, consumers could receive instructions on whether it belongs in a recycling bin, needs special disposal, or it can even be repurposed. And a final application here is product traceability information. AI can provide transparency into the sourcing, manufacturing, and recycling of products, helping consumers make much more informed decisions. For example, a chatbot could share details about a product's carbon footprint or guide users toward recyclable or ethically sourced options. And 2 examples here. First, let's take a look at Mud Jeans' subscription model for circular fashion, which again, some of you may have heard of. This model here allows consumers to lease, wear, and return their jeans for recycling, reducing the demand for raw materials and encouraging circular fashion practices. The role of AI in this particular initiative could be to recommend tailored second-hand or subscription-based options. It could send reminders for returns or even educate consumers about the environmental benefits of circular fashion in general. AI can also personalise the experience, making it much more appealing and convenient for consumers. Next is Europe's right to repair legislation, which Rakesh touched on in his presentation. This very forward-thinking policy incentivises repair over replacement, and eventually it will mandate that all manufacturers provide information about product repairability and durability. The role of AI here is also critical, and it could help consumers locate repair services, connect to repair experts or DIY resources, and even receive tailored guidance for sustainable disposal or recycling based on the product type and its specific condition. AI can also simplify this entire process and empower consumers to make sustainable decisions without unnecessary barriers. The fourth area of opportunity focuses on how AI chatbots can support rental and sharing platforms, something that many consumers told us they were well aware of. So AI chatbots in this context can act as intermediaries and help consumers locate and access services like tool libraries, car sharing platforms, and rental options for other various goods. For example, a chatbot could recommend the nearest library where you can borrow a drill for a home project, saving the need to purchase one. It could also connect consumers with car sharing programs or suggest rental services for appliances or furniture. A couple of examples here that I'll talk to. The first being Philips' lighting as a service model. And this model provides lighting solutions on a subscription basis, ensuring that ownership and recycling responsibilities actually stay with the company itself. The role of AI here could be to guide consumers to similar rental or sharing services, offering tailored recommendations based on their needs, and again, educating consumers about the sustainability benefits of service-based models like this one. AI could recommend this type of solution for office spaces or even home renovations where temporary lighting needs are actually quite common. The second example is DM's Bank of Things. This is a platform that helps users track the resale value of their possessions and facilitates the easy selling of unwanted items. The role of AI in this context could be to provide personalized recommendations for the best items to sell, suggesting optimal pricing, and even connecting consumers with suitable buyers or resale platforms themselves. And all of this streamlines the circular consumption process, making it much more convenient for consumers to participate. The fifth and final area of opportunity we discussed at our industry roundtable event relates to how AI can drive education and community engagement to foster circular behaviours on an everyday basis. In terms of specific applications, a first one is circular economy education, which, as Sean mentioned, consumers are really asking for. This is a very complex space, and they're looking for simple education to really help them turn their intentions into behaviour. AI-powered tools can deliver interactive content, quizzes, even gamified challenges to raise awareness about the circular economy, key principles, and of course, behaviours. Thinking about chatbots in particular, a chatbot could guide consumers through fun, educational activities, such as identifying sustainable practices or creating personalised sustainability goals for themselves. And interactive features like this make learning about circular behaviours much more engaging and even accessible to diverse audiences. The second application is community engagement and local recommendations. And here, AI tools can suggest local initiatives such as repair cafes, upcycling workshops, and tool libraries, again, as I mentioned earlier. A chatbot could inform users about a nearby repair cafe happening on the weekend, or even recommend joining a local upcycling group. And by connecting individuals to community-led sustainability efforts, AI can really help foster collective action, which we know is significant in terms of driving this entire economy forward. And two final examples to highlight how AI can foster education and community engagement in circularity are the two on this slide. The first being the What Design Can Do Circular Design Initiative. This initiative promotes sustainable innovation, and it does this by supporting locally sourced materials and recycling practices. Here, AI can enhance community engagement by organising local repair events, recommending tailored sustainability challenges, and even gamifying circular practices. For instance, an AI chatbot could help consumers discover nearby workshops or suggest challenges to inspire creative reuse and recycling. A second example is eBay's Sneaker Swap Shop. And what this shop does is bring together sneaker enthusiasts to exchange high-value secondhand sneakers. And this really blends reselling with restoration. The role of AI here could be to amplify participation, and it could do this by recommending nearby swap events, matching users with relevant items based on their preferences, and facilitating seamless exchanges. By simplifying the process, AI can really ensure that broader engagement and can help build a vibrant community around reuse. So as a quick summary from all of our presentations today, I think it's quite clear, and hopefully you all agree, that AI chatbots have a very promising potential to break down the barriers and amplify those facilitators to circular consumption. And AI chatbots primarily do this by offering personalised, actionable and accessible solutions. And ultimately, we think this really will empower consumers to adopt circular behaviours in their everyday lives. Now, as we move forward as a project team, we're very excited to take our next steps. The first being a survey, as Vlad mentioned, where we'll start to test the effects of AI-driven circular consumption interventions on consumer behaviour. But following that, we also will be exploring the development of a dedicated circular AI assistant. And we have a lot of faith in this tool and that it can be designed to integrate the various applications that we've all discussed today into one single user-friendly platform that ultimately makes circular consumption more practical, more engaging, and more impactful. And with that, I'm going to hand you back to Vlad and I hope you stay connected for all of the updates yet to come with this research piece.
Thank you, Carla, and thank you to everyone for their fantastic presentations. So there's lots of great insights in there, and now open up the floor to any questions or discussion. So we've got around sort of 5 minutes, maybe 10 at the most. So if you have any thoughts to share or you'd like to ask Rakesh, Sean, or Carla a question, you feel free to do so in the chat, or you can private message me as well, and I can call out the questions and coordinate the discussion. Okay, so we've got a couple of private chat messages coming through, so I'll just call out as they come in order. So the first one here is, how can businesses ensure that their circular initiatives are inclusive and accessible to diverse consumer groups? Does anyone fancy taking that question?
I'll try start it, and then yeah, we'll leave it open to the rest. So I think firstly, businesses are in a mandate position right now because of the new ESG compliance rules coming in place. So I think that's a really good starting point for business to dive into. Okay, what does it mean to my business? What does the ESG framework looks into? And then that will circular opportunity will provide a framework to reduce the ESG. So it's actually ticking off two boxes. Is you're enabling your business for a long-term future proofing, but also ticking off the ESG compliance box because you're working through. From an initiatives perspective, I've been speaking to a lot of companies, and I always refer back to this digitalization journey, where in '94 we never used to be living in a door-to-door world. Right now we order everything to the door, gets everything delivered. So, and again, it was an overnight switch. It's a journey we took over, and businesses sort of transformed everyone over the last 20 years. If you would have told someone in '95 that you need a modem, you need an internet, you need a laptop, you need a PayPal system, or you need an online banking system, all that stuff would have been impossible to digest in one go. So I feel that the journey towards circularity and educating a diverse customer group, we will be coming up with small initiatives. It could be exactly what Carla was referring to, opening up a reselling platform within your existing platform, or working on buyback schemes. And then you work through the journey, and then you sort of open up to the audience, because it's a bit of a catch-22. Either consumer desires come first, or businesses will drive those desires, and marketing plays a big role in here. So yeah, it's a broader response to this broader question, but I feel it's a journey rather than a transformation that can happen overnight. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Rakesh. I've got a question in the public chat here, which is from Civileye. So in your study, did you investigate only B2C companies? And perhaps you might also think about interviewing B2B companies, so supply chain members. Do you think the challenges and barriers will be similar or different across the two contexts?
Add there that we pretty sure we had a broad base of the two types in the workshop, but the interviews per se have only been with consumers, and then the survey also just with consumers. So the workshop phase was kind of where we integrated the business perspective, and yeah, there was a mix of B2B and B2C, but it was a relatively small group of probably less than 15 people.
And it's an interesting one because a B2B will ultimately have a B2C. So the desire for B2B as well to drive that change in terms of the opportunities and the supply chain challenges will again be the desire that will be driven by B2C consumer, because ultimately something is going into one place where the end consumer will be ultimately get in touch to. Either could be through a multi-layer approach or direct approach. So yeah, I see it's all interconnected, but of course, yeah, it's definitely a different type of audience with different priorities right now. Yeah.
Cool. And I've got another question here, which was a private message from Alina at Griffith. So with some of the more consumer-facing applications of AI in this space, it seems like we need the consumer to make the decision to engage with AI. So for example, looking for ways to reuse or repair an item. Do we have any insights on how we would encourage this action, especially amongst more AI reluctant consumers? So I guess it's all about kind of how do we get consumers to even engage with the AI in the first place, and encouraging those actions.
So I can start there. I think it's a definite barrier. I think that we're not going to get everyone to adopt technology in the short term, but I think the view is if it can be a kind of the thin edge of the wedge and a catalyst for change and a catalyst for changing behavior, then I think that's a great thing. But in terms of the answers to that question is exactly part of what we're looking at with the survey phase and some of the questions that we've got to try and quantify interest, demand, uptake, barriers, and so on with a broader sample. So yeah, it's definitely an issue that's top of mind and something that we're thinking through.
Yeah, and I might just add that absolutely we'll be testing that in our experimental survey, but I think if we look at areas where AI chatbots have really taken off, customer service being a big area, and actually our previous masterclass we spoke about the opportunity for AI chatbots in that context. But I think we have seen a lot of consumer uptake in that regard, and there's a lot to learn from there and applying that to, I guess, circular consumption. So things like design aspects, consumer education, even looking at things like rewards and incentivizing that behavior, I think can really help. But we've definitely got a lot to learn from that customer service space, which has really taken you know, to the next level over the last 12 to 18 months.
Definitely. Thank you for those responses. I don't have any more questions coming through at this stage. So it is already 1 o'clock. So I might take the opportunity now to wrap up and sort of let people get back to their day. So if you're kind of interested in what we do as a research group, there's kind of 3 kind of easy ways for you to get involved in our activities. So you can sign up to our newsletter, which contains the latest kind of CX trends and insights, and we send that out quarterly. You can also follow our LinkedIn page, which now has, I think, over 12,000 followers globally. And this is where we post our regular kind of content and updates. So if you want to chat to us directly, you can also, you know, reach us at any time via the email on that screen. And you can also reach out to Rakesh anytime. And we've got a little QR code there you can scan to get in touch with Rakesh and learn about your product passport and some of the work that Rakesh is doing in this space, which has been really fantastic to see and such a great initiative. So that pretty much wraps up our 5th installment of our CXI Masterclass series, and it is the final one for 2024. We'll be announcing our next Masterclass date and topic in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. And I'd like to say thank you again to Rakesh, Sean, and Carla for putting together such wonderful and insightful presentations for this session. And thank you all again for joining us. Hopefully you've managed to inspire you with some fresh ideas related to AI and circular consumption, and we look forward to seeing you in the next masterclass. We hope you have a wonderful holiday break. Thank you very much, and bye for now.